Welcome to the STR Home Financing Podcast, where we believe a legacy is something you build, not just something you leave behind. And now, here's your host, Jeff Chisum.
Hey, this is Jeff Chisum with the STR Home Financing Podcast. Hope you are doing well. Welcome to episode 63, and we are going to talk about some strategies, some ways to keep cash in your pocket. The majority of my clients are using the 10% down second home occupancy loan to buy these lifestyle assets, these second homes that they're going to rent out on a short-term basis. And most of my clients don't have unlimited resources. They don't have just an endless supply of cash to put into this deal. And for a lot of people, they don't believe in dumping a bunch of cash in a real estate deal, especially for cash flow producing property. Some people do. Some people want to keep that liability low. They want to increase their cash flow. But what I want to lay out for you today is just some ways to think about how you can structure a deal to minimize your cash outlay. Because from experience, at surface level, you think you need a certain amount, and once you get into the property after closing, you find out it's more than you budgeted for or estimated. So I find, just as a rule of thumb, the more cash you can put into your pocket or keep in your pocket, it's just going to be safer. It's going to be more comfortable. And well, ultimately, you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you're going to get in trouble financially, where you've completely depleted your resources and left yourself in a bad spot. But also, you don't want to put yourself in a position where you go into a property and you have to be really conservative about setting that property up so that it's going to stand out in the crowd. Because more than likely, you're like most of my clients, that you have certain expectations about how this property is going to perform. And at the very least, you want it to pay for itself, if not positive cash flow. So yeah, let's just make sure that we're doing smart things to keep money in our pocket. So we start with that 10% down loan. Be careful if someone tells you you have to go the investment property route, you have to put 25% down. This transaction becomes a lot more of a commitment from a cash standpoint. So yeah, we're going to utilize the 10% down second home occupancy loan, but we want to make sure that we are in tune with what the market will allow. So what we are seeing in a lot of the vacation rental markets is people that got into short-term rentals during COVID. Money was easy. Everybody was making money. Everybody was making historically high money. And then the market started to normalize. You didn't have all the COVID travelers. And then people started figuring out that this wasn't just 100% passive income. It was like any other business. It took a lot of work to do it well, do it right, and make money at it. Those people are figuring out that it wasn't cut out for them. They're ready to sell. So we're seeing a lot more opportunities in markets with listings coming on. And with that, in some market areas, there's a surplus of listings. So it's all about supply and demand. We're in a potentially environment, or you may find yourself potentially in an environment, and this would be a question for your realtor. They're going to be more knowledgeable than anyone about how deals are being done, what can be asked, what cannot be asked, but you at least need to know what to approach them with. So, it's not just taken for granted that they're going to go out and put together the smartest deal for you. Some realtors may put together the easiest deal, the one that they know that will get accepted. And ultimately, that's their job, is to make sure that they get you into a deal that is fair, it works for you, and you get under contract for that property that you love. But let's go next level. Let's approach them with a conversation of, hey, what is a way that I can write this contract that's going to keep money in my pocket? So we look at things like the seller paying for the title policy. That's easily could be a couple of $1,000s. Seller concessions. So this would be money that the seller would contribute towards your closing costs. So that's going to be bank fees, title fees, the prepays for your taxes and insurance, so the money that you'll need in reserves, which is usually about 3 months for taxes and insurance, because you're going to skip your first payment typically. So you've got to have money already into that account for that skip payment. They put some cushion in there, so when it comes back to the next year, those bills can be paid. There won't be a shortfall. I'm sure you know how that works, but just in case. And then your first year of homeowners insurance. A lot of times we're seeing closing costs anywhere from 3 to 5%, depending on where the pricing of the loan is. That could be a little bit higher. What is allowed on a 10% down second home occupancy loan is that the seller can contribute up to 6% towards those closing costs. One thing to remember there, though, is you don't want to leave money on the table, because that money, if it exceeds the down payment, or I'm sorry, if it exceeds the closing costs that I just mentioned, closing costs and prepays, that money cannot go towards your down payment. You just want to make sure that you're very in tune with your loan officer on what those closing costs are before you go into a contract proposing that they pay that very limit of 6%, because you just don't want to leave money on the table. Now, it could be that you could talk to them about paying points, or what would it cost to buy down the interest rate, include that in your closing cost to get up to that 6% potentially. You just want to be aware of what that amount is so that you're not leaving money on the table. So the other thing, and you got a lot of newer agents in the business that aren't aware of appearance allowances. Back before, gosh, it's hard to remember when we were in a buyer's market, but sellers were writing into deals to allow for allowances to go towards things like flooring or light cosmetic updates, paint, maybe window coverings, things of that nature. So we're seeing that coming back around. I've done that on deals myself here within the past few years, where at closing, the seller is going to put X amount of dollars in an escrow account with the title company. So number one, you have to be careful of is that the title company will allow for that to be done, because they're going to be the ones to manage those funds. They're not released directly to you. Those checks have to be cut to a contractor. So that means you've got to have a contractor's bill in place, not just an estimate, a guesstimate. It needs to be for this many square foot of flooring to be replaced. It's going to be X amount of dollars for paint work to be done to repaint these rooms. It's going to be X amount of dollars. Here's labor, paint, materials, tax. Here's your total. That invoice is going to be held by the title company. The money from the seller is going to be held with the title company, and then they will release those funds to the contractor once it's verified that the work has been completed, or any agreed upon stair stepping of the release of the funds, deposit, or they require X amount before they'll get started, and then releasing the funds once the work is done. So you just want to make sure that you have a title company on board with that. You've got a contractor that's on board with doing business that way. But yeah, a couple of ways that you, beyond just only having to put 10% down, writing up the contract and the offer that will keep money in your pocket. Now, those all can be outside of things that come back from the inspection that you also negotiate to have done. Now, those things you want to have done before the closing, because you'll want the seller to have those things taken care of. So those are typically going to be safety type issues, things that are broken, things that are not working. So yeah, that could be on top of what you're asking for up front. So again, you want to be in tune with your realtor, make sure that you're not going to overextend your ask and blow the deal. But if you've got a motivated seller, they just may be willing to negotiate, accept whatever it takes to get the deal done. On a $500,000 deal, 6%, that's $30,000. Now, the one thing that I will say on the improvements, I would never ask for more than 5% of the sales price, because then it starts to get into more of money that would be associated with updates on remodels, which a lender may not like. So that's the other thing, is you want to make sure that you talk to your lender about what you're doing, just to make sure they have experience with that, which we do, our team does. We've done deals like that to make sure that you're not going to get into a situation where it gets into underwriting. The underwriter says, yeah, this is more than cosmetic repairs. They're doing more of a remodel, and we don't feel comfortable with that being done after the closing. So that's another thing that's important to keep in mind. Hope this all helped. Hope this will keep money in your pocket. Always happy to jump on a phone call. You can go to my website, strhomefinancing.com. There's a scheduling link there. There's a chat feature. But until next time.
Jeff Chisum is a registered mortgage loan officer, NMLS 673623 with CMG Home Loans, NMLS ID 1820. CMG Home Loans is an equal housing lender. All programs, products, and terms discussed on this show are subject to change without notice.